In his homeland, they called him simply by name, Federico. In Europe, by his mother's family name, probably for brevity and because it sounded cordial. And every time pronouncing Lorca, we add a talented poet and dramatist, a gifted musician and painter. Federico García Lorca was born on the 5th of June, 1898, in a little town of Fuente Vaqueros, which translated means a shepherd's source. The childhood of Federico passed in an atmosphere of poetry and music. His mother played the piano well, and his father liked to read poems and sing old Andalusian songs. When Federico was 11 years of age, his family moved to Granada. There, Lorca met a well-known Spanish composer, Manuel de Falla, who taught Federico the so-called deepened singing, cante hondo, one of the oldest examples of the Andalusian folk art. García Lorca's life in the field of art began with music. The Spanish press greeted the 18-year-old pianist Lorca enthusiastically, performing his own compositions. At the same time, he took his first steps in literature. A collection of travel notes about Spain, impressions and landscapes, was published in 1918. A year later, Garcia entered the student residence in Madrid, an experimental educational institution, which functioned on the model of free universities. Federico had many friends who were students. One of them, who later became the famous film producer Luis Buñuel, characterized Lorca as a brilliant and charming young man, with the aspiration for refinement and elegance in his clothes. Salvador Dalí, the surrealist painter, remembered his first meeting with Lorca in this way. The phenomenon of poetry in all his flesh and blood suddenly appeared before me. Absorbed in literature and music, Lorca didn't have either time or desire to be interested in women. To love him is the same that to love the wind, said once Ana Maria, young sister of Dalí, who was enamored of Federico. Lorca prepared to become a musician, tried to write prose, but suddenly, as he said, obeying the categorical imperative of his soul, he started to write verses. My soul has long been ripe, it decays, murky with mystery. Childish stones gnawed by illusion fall on the waters of my thought. Every stone says, God is far away. Even the first poetical collection of Federico García Lorca, published in 1921, was already marked by the melodious nature of his verse, rooted in the popular folk customs. He received the sobriquet, the student of folklore, from the circle of his friends, which was approved by Lorca, when during the Festival of Folklore in the Granada Center of Art, he gave a public lecture about the folk songs, and then created a series of verses called the Poems of Cante Hondo. The Guadalquivir River flows between orange and olive trees. The two rivers of Granada descend from the snow to the wheat fields. Oh, love, you go away, not to return. Federico Lorca was also gifted with the ability to paint. The exhibition of his works was held in Barcelona in 1927. In a year, Lorca publishes the collection Gypsy Ballads, where, according to him, he wanted to unite the gypsy mythology and everyday life. 8 years later, a gendarmerie colonel producing this book in court accused its author of insulting the gendarmerie by means of the romance. They never weep because their skull are of lead. With their patent leather soles, they ride down the road. At the age of 31, in search of new impressions, Lorca went to the United States. He wrote, "New York is probably awful. That is why I'm going there." This peculiar experiment with his own life ended with the book of verses, Poet in New York. "33-year-old Lorca headed the students' theater company La Barraca, which translated means the show. Federico was both the producer and actor, and at the same time the painter and dramatist. It didn't even occur to the audience that the author of the play, which they watched for free, was a great Spanish poet, Federico García Lorca. At the age of 35, he created a tragedy, Blood Wedding. In 3 years, he wrote a drama, The House of Bernarda Alba, a kind of photography of the age. It was the age of a real blossoming out of the creative abilities of García Lorca. He wrote play after play, gave lectures, recited poems, and performed musical compositions. In 1936, the clouds were gathering over Spain. The fascists wanted to assume power. Lorca wasn't a member of any political party, but nobody doubted his convictions. Not without reason, the performances of his plays ended with the demonstrations, and the spectators, instead of "Bravo," cried "Long live to the freedom." In June of 1936, the rebels headed by General Franco invaded Granada and advanced a slogan, "Death to the intellectuals." They shot doctors, teachers, and scientists without any judgment. Federico García Lorca was shot on the 19th of August, 1936. The poet was buried in the common grave. He was only 38. Shortly before his death, the famous Spanish poet and dramatist Federico García Lorca wrote, "The biggest joy of life is to be the poet. The rest doesn't count, even the death."